ULTRAKILL is one of my favorite games to come out in the last couple of years. I love how every single weapon and tech in this game feels like it was specifically made to make you feel like an action movie star. Surprisingly though, there is one weapon that feels pretty unremarkable and tame when compared to the rest of the game's weapons. The sawed-on shotgun variant. While chainsaws are normally saved as power weapons that have a special animation or something, in ULTRAKILL, it tends to look a little more like this. However, in a game focused on swapping your weapons frequently and shooting your opponent dead, I wanted to see if it would be possible to beat the game with only the chainsaw. Jumping feet first into hell, like I did coming out of the womb, I was introduced to my main as well as only weapon for the entire run, the chainsaw. Instead of shooting out a grenade, or charging up an extra strong blast like the other shotgun variants, this weapon's alternate fire has you rev up a chainsaw that is a very effective damage and healing source at the cost of it being super unstylish. The chainsaw is great at dispatching weaker enemies, as well as taking care of tougher enemies and bosses that tend to stick close to you. This makes the chainsaw a little overpowered in my opinion, and also slightly boring to use. I ran on through the first level, chopping up anything and everything in my way until I came across the malicious face. This guy floats in the air, which would be a little annoying to hit with my chainsaw if it wasn't for the very first chainsaw tech that I can show you guys. Letting go of the alt fire launches the chainsaw, which you can then parry to launch again. This is called yo-yoing, and would be my main damage source for the majority of the run, due to the highly increased damage it deals compared to the regular chainsaw. I blasted through the levels and didn't face any challenges until I came across the swords machine, which introduced the main issue I would experience throughout the course of the run. I had decided at the very beginning of the run that the only way I could deal damage would be through the chainsaw and its various techs. But as I had mentioned earlier, my main way of dealing damage was through the yo-yoing strat. This led to many instances where I would accidentally punch something, or I would parry an attack and deal damage that way. When these instances happened, I would either die on purpose or reset to the last checkpoint. I think at least. ULTRAKILL is an extremely hectic game, so if you notice any footage of me fucking it up, I've already put the entire dream apology in the description. I made my way through the rest of the Prelude, slowly getting a feel for this yo-yoing tech, and eventually opened the doors to hell, descending deeper into the abyss. Stepping into hell proper, I would experience the second big challenge of this run. Flying enemies were consistently a hard time for me, and were my main drive to improve with the yo-yoing tech, as the chainsaw has a fairly long cooldown after you launch it. A little later on, we fight another malicious face, and if you rewind the footage and slow it down, You can already see that I failed the entire challenge by parrying him and not resetting. Hold on, guys. Despite the many resets from accidentally doing damage, I still was considering this challenge extremely easy. Ultrakill is a difficult game, don't get me wrong, but I had already gotten every P rank and beaten the 2 super bosses already. There wasn't much this game could throw at me that could keep me on my toes. That was until I met him. The creature. Oh. Well, that was simple. The rest of Limbo was a breeze. Hell, V2 wasn't even that much of a challenge. But, much to my enjoyment, the game would start getting significantly harder from here on. Moving into Lust, and this is when things started getting serious. Maurice would start appearing more often. Harder and harder enemies like the soldiers and mind flayers would start appearing. And finally, at the end of Lust, I would have to fight a boss that I initially thought would be the end of this run. The corpse of King Minos. Originally, I had forgotten that King Minos keeps his hands on the edges of the arena. This is so you can grab a quick heal, but his hands take substantially less damage than his face, which is what you should be focusing on for the majority of the fight. Unfortunately for me, his face was just slightly out of reach of my chainsaw, even when yo-yoing. This meant that this fight was going to take forever. Or that would be the case if it wasn't for the next chainsaw tech that I'm excited to show off. Untethering. To untether, you have to launch the chainsaw with the alt fire, but instead of parrying it with the feedbacker, you have to parry it with the knuckle blaster. This will untether the chainsaw from the shotgun, launching it at a decent speed and causing it to deal even more damage than the yo-yo. While overall I still get more DPS from yo-yoing, I would use this strat very often against big out-of-reach enemies and bosses, as well as bosses that required too much focus on movement and dodging for me to effectively use the yo-yoing tech. With my new technique, I was able to dispatch of the corpse fairly easy, and finally move on to Gluttony. The final layer of each act serves as a gauntlet and test of your abilities and skills. Think of it as a midterm, almost. And if I was a teacher grading said midterm, I would give myself a C+. Looking back, I am quite impressed by how much I was able to improve in the 7 hours it took me to finish the game. But man, were these fights in Gluttony just extremely sloppy. There were plenty of times where I accidentally caused damage outside the chainsaw that legit just made me stand up and walk away from the game because of how frustrated I was getting. I legitimately have 2 hours of me just sitting in pause menus due to how frequent these occurrences were. This room with the 4 malicious faces was nearly the end of the run, as I was getting so pissed off I was genuinely thinking about ending the run and focusing my attention on some other shitty idea. Cooler heads prevailed though, as after I came back from a walk to clear my mind, I thought of a new technique that would carry me through the rest of the run. Yeah, no. When I came back, I just got good. You know, if you walk in a circle around Maurice, he can't really hit you that well. From here on, though, I started to pay a lot more attention to the enemies, actually taking care to learn their attacks for the first time since I began playing this game, honestly. And against all odds, I actually began to have fun with this challenge. Also, Gabriel, complete pushover. I'm sure we've all seen at least 10 videos of someone killing him with only the chainsaw before, so excuse me if I spare you the montage. Okay, so this is when this run went from kinda fun to extremely fun. I'm talking double chainsaws, sick underwater combat, soap, and riding the Minotaur like a fucking cowboy. Along with a major increase in difficulty, I found myself really enjoying these levels. There was the perfect blend of easy enemies for me to chop down, along with plenty of flying enemies to keep me on my toes. Dodging and weaving through the levels, and getting really good with the yo-yoing tech. I was really getting into a groove, you know? As I was getting closer and closer to the end of the game, there was a creeping doubt in my mind that there would eventually be one roadblock that prevented me from finishing the challenge. And honestly, I was fairly certain I knew what that roadblock was gonna be. Going into violence, there is a certain enemy that carries a big shield that blocks most forms of damage. And unfortunately, the chainsaw was not one of them. Who knew, right? A shield that can block most forms of bullets and projectiles would be completely negated by a rotating sawblade. It does seem, however, though, that the enemies in violence were made specifically to counter easy strategies that would normally let you fly through the other levels. Mannequins resist explosives and try to stay on the walls and out of sight. Guttermen have rocket denial and crazy long-range tracking to prevent snipers. And gutter tanks have ultra-high damage explosions coupled with landmines and a super fast punch to prevent melee strats. That is all to say that violence was an extremely serious skill check for me. And I was no longer able to just fly through these levels like I'd previously. I had some serious trouble getting through this layer, but I was managing all the way up until I had to fight the Earth Mover. See, I was doing great. It was a challenge, but I was still making great time. But when I got inside this horse's fucking noggin, I proceeded to spend the next 50 minutes bashing my fucking head into the wall as I sat there dying death after death. I spent so long in there that 50 minutes began to feel more like 55 minutes. This fight was tedious, and there was way too much going on for my feeble brain to keep up with the yo-yoing strat. So I opted to do only untethers for damage and focus mainly on dodging, as this is one of the most punishing fights in the game when it comes to making mistakes. Many times I would fuck up a dodge and end up dying to the lasers, or I would accidentally parry the orbs into the brain. The winning attempt took me 3 minutes to kill him, which is an absurdly long kill as it normally takes you about 20 to 40 seconds to kill the Earth Mover. But I won, against all odds. After one more small arena of mobs, I beat the level, and proved without a doubt, and without exception, that you can beat Ultrakill with only the chainsaw. But, you know what would be crazy? Beating not only the main story, but the super secret bosses too. Would that be possible? So, first things first, I did drop the difficulty down, as I didn't feel like P-ranking every level on Violent. Secondly, is this even possible? These two bosses, and P2, are the toughest challenges the game has to offer you. Only unlocked after P-ranking every level in the game. Due to this, the game fully expects you to use every mechanic, as well as having a very good understanding of said mechanics. So, I'm going to start at the beginning, P1, and right away, I'm pretty sure it's impossible to kill the flesh prison with only the chainsaw. Killing the flesh prison would be simple, and not a challenge, but due to its ability to heal from the floating eyeballs, you either have to have some serious AoE that can kill most of them in one hit, or a weapon that can fire fast enough to kill them all before the flesh prison goes in for its heal. Now, I'm sure you've noticed if you've been watching this far, but the chainsaw is neither of those things. But you know, it would be a real cock tease if we made it this far, only to give up because of a few trash mobs that fly around. I allowed myself one exception here. I could use the pistol to kill the eyeballs, but I would have to deal the damage to the flesh prison with only the chainsaw. So I got to work, making sure to stick firmly in my rules, and after a very long fight, I was able to eke out a win on the flesh prison. Now, the real fight could begin. Minos Prime, to my surprise, was completely possible, and in fact, kinda easy with only the chainsaw. It's really absurd how overpowered this thing is for one-on-one fights. So, that's one down. Now, it's time for the hardest level and boss in the entire game. P2, Weight of the World. This level is difficult. Very difficult. And honestly, downright unfair at times. But would it be any harder with only the chainsaw? Again, to my surprise, no, it wasn't. I was able to get through most of the level in only 10 minutes. But my hopes, dreams, and sanity died in the last arena of the level. This fucking room, took me hours to complete. Hours. So much to keep track of, so many opportunities to accidentally punch something, limited healing due to that invincible stalker, and only to end it off with virtues so high in the room, I would require an untether to hit them. This room was torturous. This room was evil. And honestly, I was starting to lose hope that this level was even possible with the chainsaw. Even if I was able to get to that last wave with the 2 Cerberuses and the 3 virtues, I literally did not have the skill to be able to evade perfectly for upwards to 3 to 7 minutes that it would take me to kill those virtues with only the untethering. With the Earth Mover, I was barely able to manage dodging the lasers and parrying the orb for 3 minutes. Needing to do that again, but with 2-star pitchers for the Brooklyn Dodgers and PS1 Hagrid shooting mortar strikes at me, meant it was not gonna happen. What I needed was a new strategy, a new technique. And lo and behold, I think I may have discovered it on accident when I was doing an attempt. That's right. I was able to execute a super jump from smacking the jackhammer against the ground. I was so excited and confused about what happened that I immediately quit the level and went to Sandbox to practice this. That's right, I did this godforsaken level twice. Moving on. Now, there is a tech in this game called jackhammer jumps, where if you smack the ground while jumping, you can gain some extra height. This is cool and all, but it only really gives you as much as a slam jump. But I discovered that if you jump near the same frame the jackhammer hits the ground, you will be able to execute a super jump that is higher and faster than the full impact jackhammer jump. This effect is only increased by how much momentum you have. This is it at 0 momentum, and at full impact, you're able to execute an almost pseudo slam storage jump. Now, I haven't really seen anyone talk about this trick, nor have I really seen any videos about it either. If this has already been discovered, please tell me in the comments, but I've been calling this trick the jackfly. The jackfly is exactly what I needed to defeat those goddamn virtues. That is, if it was a little more consistent. Yeah, I know, I just went through a whole ass class on how to use this tech. But let's be real, I'm not a task bot. While slam storage jumps are a little slower to do than the jackfly, it's unrealistic that I'd be able to hit frame perfect jumps when I got the bloat as 2 minions turning me into scrap metal. After a lot of time and stubborn refusal to give up on the challenge, I finally beat the room, and felt a happiness greater than witnessing the birth of my first child. I was ready to fight the hardest, toughest boss in the entire game. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. I felt like I had won. This challenge broke me down, but at the same time it built me up. My skill in this game was starting to stagnate, and my interest in it was waning. But after all I learned, and all the hardship I endured, I felt a childlike joy from playing it again. This challenge made me realize I can still improve, and I could discover something new. And against all odds, I could win. So, even if it was impossible to kill Sisyphus Prime, I still gained so much from the challenge itself.
How about that? Right when the box opens, how about everybody writes hashtag in the comments?
This prison.
You know what I mean? Like we got. That's what we'll do. So in the comment section below, right when this opens, everybody say
King Sisyphus. King Sisyphus. King Sisyphus.
the box.
And I killed him. Seriously, it only took me 3 minutes to kill Sisyphus, versus the 110 minutes it took me to complete that last arena. At the end of this challenge, I was amazed that everything, save for one, was possible with the chainsaw. And earlier, I wasn't joking. This challenge renewed a lot of vigor that I had for this game, and gave me the kick I needed to go back and P-rank the violence levels, and both the prime sanctums as well. At the end though, I hope you were able to learn something, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Before I sign off, I would like to give a big shout out to Kushi Rojin, who made the art for this video's thumbnail. Her commissions are open. Check her out. That's all I gotta say. Take care and thanks for stopping by.